All right, everybody, we are live, and we have the pleasure of having on the director and co-writer of the film Beezel from this year. Came out a few weeks ago. There are not a lot of good witch movies out there, but this is one of them. So without further ado, let's bring out Aaron Fradkin. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, like I said, we were talking backstage, and we were just saying how there's not an abundance of witch films out there.
I
Like,
would
and there
agree.
never really has been. I feel like it's a very you don't get many films in that subgenre. I mean, you have the Blair Witch Project, which is probably one of the most popular, which is a movie I really don't care for. It never really worked for me. I like the sequel actually better. But what got you into? Let's start with: are you a horror fan? And
I
have
certainly
you?
am.
You
I
certainly
certainly.
am.
I mean, I think from a creative like filmmaker standpoint, horror is also just the most fun to make.
Yeah.
I mean, if you make a romantic comedy, for example, there's only so much you can do within that. You're not
Mm.
going to be tearing someone's guts out. However, you can make a horror movie and have an element of romance in there if you want. So within
Yeah.
horror, there really is no limit to what you can or can't do. I mean, you can dive into character, story, creature design. You can have fun with special effects. We love practical effects. That's,
So do I.
what we will work with any opportunity that we get. You can work with visual effects, and it's just such a beautiful combination of fun magic tricks for the audience and an opportunity to just dive into story and character. And it can be funny, it can be scary. Again, there's really just no limit.
No, yeah, there's no boundary in horror. I mean, you can go, like you said, in any direction. You have horror comedies, you have just you can elicit any emotion in a horror film and make it work. Now, when it came to creating this whole backstory for Beezel, like how did this whole story and script come about?
Well, I'm from Massachusetts, so
Okay,
we actually shot this movie in the house that I grew up in.
I read that.
Anybody
Yes.
knows anything about Massachusetts, there's a lot of witchcraft history that
Yep.
that's that went on there. So it wasn't too much of a stretch of the imagination to make a film in Massachusetts about a witch. Um, we actually originally, when we started writing, did not even plan on making it about a witch. It was more so some entity that lived downstairs, that lived in this house. If you notice, the movie does kind of feel like an anthology.
Yes, it
The
does.
reason
That's
and the
something I
reason why
really enjoy about it.
the reason how that came to be is we actually shot the middle portion first about this nurse
Okay.
taking care of this elderly woman. And when I went back to the West Coast and I edited the whole thing, we showed it to a bunch of friends and industry people, and the feedback was just so resoundingly positive that it galvanized us, encouraged us to write what happened before and what happened after. And sort
Yeah.
of through that process, we learned that this is a story about this witch, and we thought it would be really interesting to tell this story over the period of 60 years. And that's sort
Yeah.
of how it all came to be.
Yeah, that's one thing I was really intrigued by the first time watching it because it felt like three distinct sections where you're focused on, the very beginning, which you can't even say it's the beginning. Who knows how long this witch has been, down there or in this house. But
Just
y-
forever, just eternally.
yeah, yeah. So with the wings, then the middle section, which is interesting. That's what you guys shot first, and then afterwards the family. Now I don't want to assume, but it's your wife or sister or relative
My
that
wife,
you co-wrote, wife that you co-wrote, and she stars in that third
she does.
segment, if you will, which everyone does such a great job with the acting in this movie. And what was the section like? Did you continue writing it in or shooting it in sections? Like after you had that first middle section done, did you go back and do the first section or the last section, or
So
was it?
believe it or not, after shooting that first section, that the middle section first, the
Mhm.
first thing that we did when we flew back to Massachusetts to continue was that final section with my wife, Victoria, who
Okay.
was also the co-writer, and then she produced the film.
Yeah.
Um, So we shot that final section second, and then
Okay.
we ended the shoot with the opening of the movie. So that would be like the first 20 minutes with
Yeah.
Kid and Apollo
Apollo, yeah. Which
Dreams.
great character too. And now I noticed there's a decent amount of scenes in the movie and emphasis on, footage or film. Did it ever like occur to you to maybe go the found footage route at some point, or was that just
I
something that
mean,
just
I
came
feel
about?
like you and I might agree on this. You say you're not the biggest fan of Blair Witch Project. Well, I'm not a fan of Blair Witch Project. I'm not the biggest fan of just found footage.
Mm,
I like flexing my filmmaker muscle as much as I can and actually,
yeah.
storyboarding shots. Not that you can't do that in found footage, but it's a lot more. It's a lot
Oh
more.
yeah, more in depth, more you can have, like you said, it's more enjoyable. You can spend more time with it.
Certainly. I just like sort of classic filmmaking in that regard. But I also do think that found footage offers something to the horror genre specifically that just something intangible, something that just it makes it feel real. And
Yeah,
especially with horror, that's what we're always trying to go for is how can we take the unreal and make it feel real? And so sprinkling in a little bit of found footage, but justifying it in a way that makes sense. So the
yeah,
characters in every storyline are actually using a camera and we see them using a camera. It's justified when we cut to see what it is that they're filming. It just adds this element of realism that I really love. So that is the pro. That is a good thing about found footage movies. But yeah, it's really just a personal preference. I'm not a fan of just making a fully found footage movie. At least not right now.
okay. No, and it's interesting because it does add a lot of authenticity to those scenes. And one thing that I really praise the most about this movie, and we've been getting a lot of great horror movies this year, and especially last month, this month, going into Halloween, and some big movies too, like Beetlejuice, and we had Alien Romulus. So I feel like this is a movie that I want to get out and talk about, and because I feel like not as many people are going to see this, and it's a really well-made film, and the atmosphere is fantastic throughout this. So when I read on IMDb the trivia section, it had the one bit of the trivia here that you filmed this in your childhood home and based a lot of the scares on actual like nightmares you had as a kid. I said that makes a lot of sense because you could feel it through the film. And like you could feel that you were so comfortable with this is where you grew up. So you probably had a lot of these images instilled in you probably from a young age, right?
Absolutely. I mean, every scene we fully take advantage of every nook, any trap door and hidden crawl space within the walls.
Yeah,
And it was all made possible because while writing, we knew what this house looked like. We knew what we had access to.
yeah.
So that's also what allowed us to shoot this on a budget. We did not have to build any set. Everything you see is 100% authentic. That is the house as it was built.
That's awesome. The
Yeah.
did now what inspired the design for Beezel? We see her, and I like how we don't see her too much in this movie. Like you see her just enough that when she's there, her presence is goddamn known. Like she makes her presence known. With the great effects too, with the head rip off and everything. It looks like you stuck to mostly practical effects.
Yes. Obviously, we did not actually rip off somebody's head, although
Yeah, I mean, it would have been cool probably, but you would have
there
got in
are
trouble.
plenty of people I know that no, but yeah, I mean the witch design was really I have to give props to my wife Victoria, who no pun intended built the props.
Nice.
She designed the witch and did a lot of the special effects makeup herself. We had a VFX artist, Sam Evenson, who you know zhuzhed it up a little bit in post, but I would say
Yeah,
the witch design, it's like 99% practical effects.
that's how it looked. Yeah, it really looks good. So props Victoria for
Mhm.
for the design. It
Yeah,
really is effective.
I agree.
When Now, I'm gonna get a little to spoilers for people who haven't seen it. I mean, when you guys see this, if you don't want spoilers, just avoid this. But I like how it mentions and how you built the lore. Like the pacing of this movie it's very well paced, going from those segments, if you want to call them segments, from one to the next, like in time, because it helps build that atmosphere, but it builds the lore and backstory of Beezel very well in that amount of time that you've allotted each of those segments, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And how much went into her backstory? Like, how far back did you want to go? How ambiguous did you want to be? Was there anything that you wanted to throw in there, but you didn't end up using in the end?
So ambiguity was certainly the goal from the beginning. I think that
Yeah,
this leaves it open to do so much more in the future. And I would not be opposed to, expanding the Beezel verse.
that would be interesting. I'd love to
And
see that.
when writing this, we actually did write out a full page of who Beezel is, where she comes from, why she kills, how she does it, and sort of all of her powers and lore. And yeah, it's a very like compelling, tragic, and sad story that we came up with. And we deliberately chose not to really explore that in this movie. That Beezel is really meant to just sort of be like an odyssey of haunts. It's sort of an odyssey of throughout time of
Mhm.
the tragedies that have occurred in this one house. But yeah, if we were to ever make a sequel or expand this, then we actually already have all of that lore fleshed out. Again, no pun intended.
Yeah,
Fully fleshed out.
I'm thinking because I was thinking as with at the end, not to give it away, but we see something near the end, which is established early on
Mhm.
about Beezel. Every so often, something happens,
Yes,
and so you have a jumping off point right there to jump into a
exactly.
sequel. So, I mean, I would love to see a sequel to this.
Now,
And
let me ask you a question. Would you prefer to see a sequel or a prequel?
see, that's where I was thinking when I was initially going with the question, because I could see it going both ways. Because we don't know how long she's been down there. And like you said, it's eternal. So there's a whole bunch of story that you can go and pull towards the past, pull out of the past
Yeah,
before the events with the Weems at the
totally.
house.
There's a lot that we can do with it for sure.
Do you have any upcoming projects, the things that you're working on or coming out soon?
We do. I mean, so we're currently working on several feature ideas, a few of which are actually based on our short films from our YouTube channel. Don't want to
Okay.
give away anything right now. It's just too early, but we are working on some things, and in the back of our minds, we're always thinking about how we can expand the Beazelverse. I
Nice.
do. I'm very interested and excited about the possibility of like a prequel, but nothing is set in stone right now. Just sort of working on several different feature ideas. We also do have a short film that we already shot, which is actually coming out on our YouTube channel, Social House Films,
Nice.
in next couple weeks for Halloween.
And I'll get your YouTube channel from you afterwards. I'll put it in the
For sure.
description of
Yeah.
this video.
Had to
So
just had to plug that right now, of course.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll put it in the description of the video. That way, everybody who sees this afterwards, you guys can check out Aaron's YouTube channel for sure. Check out that short. Favorite horror movies?
Definitely Evil Dead. Everyone's gonna say, of course, but
There's a scene and a shot in the film that is so Sam Raimi Evil Dead to me, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
of course, it's so funny.
I
Like
loved it. I loved it.
I appreciate that. I'm so inspired by Sam Raimi. Like it was the one time I was starstruck when I met him. I just didn't even know what to say. But
Yeah,
but I mean he's why I moved to LA. He's what shaped me into the filmmaker I am today. And it's so interesting that, even though when making Beezel, I think tonally it's very different from Evil Dead
oh
overall.
yeah,
It's interesting to sort of see how these inspirations kind of seep out of you almost unintentionally.
yeah,
But they're there. They're definitely there. And it's interesting seeing other people say, this looks very Sam Raimi. Someone saw Evil Dead. That's
yeah,
fun.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's done in a way that it's too much but like the way that is done, that you did it
Mhm.
with it near the end with the motion, the jerky motion
Yeah. Of
is
course.
it's just it made me smile. Like it made me
Yeah.
just like awesome, like Evil Dead for sure. But like it was effective in the moment, and it's after like two other scares right in a row. So it was like the perfect capper to like three different little jump scares that are very well done in this movie too. The jump scares,
Yeah.
which are things that I don't really traditionally care for in movies. But this is more, like I said, about the atmosphere that's built throughout this film that really just has this unnerving quality to it. And
Yeah.
like I said, you always feel the presence of Beezel even when she's just taking over Nova is her character's name, right?
Mhm.
Taking her over and starting to influence or possess her, in the third act of this movie. But yeah, all the jump scares are very well done. And I guess some of them were actual nightmares or like thoughts that you had growing up.
Yeah, I mean, when I moved into this house in 1994 in Western
Mm.
Mass, I was 6 years old, and my bedroom was right above the basement where we shot much of this film, where Beezel lives. And I just remember, like, as a super young kid, being afraid because, as you can see in the movie, the house is one story. It's very, very long. It kind of curves around in like a semicircle. And
Mhm.
my bedroom was on one side, my parents' room was on the other side. And so when they would tuck me in at night, like as a 6 year old, I would always ask them, "Where are you going to be? Where in the house are you going to be?" Because it
Yeah.
was scary. I was all by myself. Right below was the basement with this loud boiler system that would just make all these noises. I would not dare go downstairs by myself.
I can relate. It's just basements are scary in general.
I know, but I would conjure up these like images in my mind, like when I was going to sleep. Like, what if this like tall, lanky, like witchy woman comes through the hallway, and
Yeah, yeah.
casts a shadow, from the nightlight that is just, casting light on the wall. Like, what I was just terrified just thinking of these things. And now,
Mm.
as a fully grown adult, I'm like bringing that to life. So it
I
was
think
very,
that
very cathartic.
yeah, I think that's why it feels so authentic too, and why the scares feel really organic in this movie, especially because you shot it where you had those thoughts.
Exactly.
So you knew exactly how to frame and shoot certain things. Like I love the decision. I don't know if it was a budgetary reason, but when the nurse in the middle segment, when she's getting killed by Beezel, it's just a shot on the door. I
Yep.
love that shot. Like I loved the sound design. The sound design is very good in this movie too.
Yeah. No, that was all the sound was done by Mike Tran. And he does
Okay,
all of this in his bedroom by himself. It's pretty
sounds
remarkable
great.
what he
Yeah,
created.
it sounded all the sounds were great in this, and that adds a lot to the atmosphere too.
I think the only direction that I gave him for that one scene that you're talking about is, we're holding on this door. I want you to actually tell a story with just sound. So just, start from the very beginning, close your eyes, imagine what is happening
Yeah,
on the other side of that door, and just make it, come to life. And he did it. I mean, the first time that he played that for me, we both just looked at each other. We're like, "Oh God, oh, this is
yeah.
awful."
No, it's very effective,
Yeah.
and like 'cause there's a lot of movies with a deformed creature of some sort that lives in the basement or the walls. In the first movie, I always think of as Castle Freak by Stuart Gordon,
Mhm.
because to me that's the best like of that subgenre. But mix that with an actual witch that we don't get a lot of, and Beezel's a vicious witch. Like this
She
isn't
is.
like it's not like as like witch movies that we've seen here and there in the last 10 years that are like more psychologically driven, which this is. But as like a being, like the witch that she is, she's brutal and she just
Yeah.
wants to rip people apart and eat them.
That's the
So
one
it's
that's the one thing that I can say confidently about this film. Say what you will about, the other details or anything about this movie. The one thing that I know for sure that I think everybody would agree on, this is a creepy ass witch, and
oh,
she
absolutely.
is terrifying.
Yeah, and that's I guess another thing that you can go into when expanding the lore of why she has to feed. I'm guessing maybe to stay young, but she looks old as shit like throughout all of it. So That's, I guess, something you can explore on in a sequel
Definitely. I mean,
or a
we have a lot of
prequel.
this, we have a lot of this written down somewhere, and I'm excited to dive into that exploration of her backstory. There's definitely a lot to explore. But what I love about Beezel and this lore that we've created is, like we were just saying in the beginning, there's really no limit what we can do. We deal with
Yeah.
possessions, we deal with, spirits. It's kind of a creature feature at the same time.
Yeah,
We
it's a
kind of
very original movie with you could see homages to all types of things, but it's a very original film when it all comes together and you just watch this movie for the first time.
well, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great watch. And yeah, thanks for coming on and talking about it, because this is a movie that I definitely want to keep spreading the word on, because
For sure.
like I said, this is a great year and time of the year for horror, and this movie definitely deserves to be seen by more people for
I
sure.
appreciate that, man. Thank you
No, absolutely.
for having me.
But everybody have a great day, and just stay a minute and I'll thank you again, man. Take care, everybody.